Welcome to the Last Talk Show, Christmas edition. Tonight we're talking to Peter Billingsley from A Christmas Story.
All the way from the island of Nantucket, Massachusetts, it's Last Talk Show! Last Talk Show!
Thank you for taking a few minutes out with us to talk.
Oh, my pleasure. Really, really happy to be here.
You got into show business very young. You did a lot of stuff, a lot of commercials first. And I was kind of remembering that and thinking, is that for an actor a little bit like, the Beatles first started at the Cavern Club and played a bunch of dates and just kind of get your chops? I don't know, I was like, oh, right, Messy Marvin. There were names that I was like, I've been watching your career for so long.
Yeah.
You did over 100 commercials, right?
I did, yeah. I was in New York in the 1970s. And so a lot of regional, a lot of national commercials. And, the business was different then. And I think even kids' careers were a little different. So it was before the Disney generation or the Nickelodeon, like these big kind of money-making careers that you see that overlap into social media and branding. So it was kind of a fun thing to do. I don't have a showbiz family. When I was 2.5, so people would say, oh, your kid's cute, so she took me to an agent, and one said, he's too ugly. The next one said, he's too fat, he'll never work. And the third one said, sure, I'll take him, why not? And she knew nothing about it, thought of it kind of as an activity, something fun to do.
Yep.
And the first commercial audition I went on was a commercial for Geritol, the multivitamin, I guess.
Sure.
I would just have to sit there with Betty Buckley, who was the mom saying, when you have kids like these, take Geritol twice a day. I went on the audition and I got it.
Yeah.
And it just was sort of, I guess I was well behaved enough and could mimic. And for child actors, that's a lot of what it is, because I don't know that you have your acting instrument at 2.5. So it's more like they'll feed you sort of what they want. And if you can repeat it to them, it works well. And my career oddly kind of started as a hobby or a novelty, and it just sort of took off because I guess I had an aptitude, and then started doing a lot of those.
I love Real People.
Yeah, that was like sort of looked back at as one of the first reality television shows, because it was an unscripted show. It was sort of bumpers and then comedic. It was like a sort of amalgamation of America's Funniest Home Videos and personalities and kind of reality TV. And we were hosts, and I did a spinoff called Real Kids that was just all kids. And an interesting anecdote, River Phoenix was doing audience warm-up for it. He was playing his guitar and singing, and he was just a kid who was sort of a peer age at the same time. And that was an amazing experience. I got to travel the country and interview. They gave me a lot of the animals, like the pig who could dunk a basketball, the dog that was too big that his owner took him to a car wash. So it was those slice of life stories, but it was a lot of fun. And I think, all those experiences, what in hindsight it gave me was, I think, a real comfort on sets. And my transition into producing was really, I found that being on set was sort of the most comfortable place I felt, because I had spent just so much time there. And also, as I got older, realized the sacrifice that my parents had made to enable me to do that. You don't realize that at the time, but I have 2 brothers, 2 sisters, so there was 5 of us. And you have to have a parent with you at all times, and they didn't farm me out to a stranger to overlook me, which a lot of the kids did. And I think it's another one of the reasons why, knock on wood, so far, I've turned out kind of okay, given that system has really been tough on a lot of people.
It's refreshing to have a happy story too. That's great. You had a great.
I know. I always say there's no true Hollywood story here, like they've called a couple times, and I'm like, guys, I don't think it's gonna have what you want.
The Real People, Real Kids also were such uniters. They were such shows about just uniting the country in a weird way, that were really celebrating real people from all walks of life, all corners of America, and kind of going like, this is funny, interesting, but also we're not so different. And it was also happening at a time where we all watched the same things together. So there was something really healthy about that. I don't know. It feels like a piece of what we're missing right now in our civil.
I kind of agree with you. It was very unifying. Like, it wasn't, its humor It didn't tread on politicization of things. It wasn't divisive. It was just like, here's a great person doing something interesting and trying to do something that's kind of quirky or cool or fun or inspiring. And you go do a story with it, and you do it with humor. But the humor was unifying, as you said, and it's just a different spirit. And you felt that. That was very clear of what was coming down from the top. And so it was a lot of fun to do, because the message was just sort of, all right, go in the field and try to unearth the story, show the country who this person is and why there's something cool about them.
Yeah. The other thing that's so interesting to me about the 70s, 80s, and I swear I'll get to the movie now, but was there were so many shows that were like Battle of the Network Stars and like Love Boat, and everybody who was at all famous ended up on these things together. So you'd have like Farrah Fawcett and Andy Warhol and Evel Knievel all doing something together, and it made celebrity feel like this one big room. Do you have any memories of a moment where you're like, how did I get in this room? Who am I with? What are we all doing together?
I loved those shows growing up, Battle of the Network Stars in particular. And it as I started to work, it was sort of one of my quiet goals. It was like, geez, I hope they ask me. I don't know if I'm famous enough. And I got asked to do one. And it was so cool because Michael J. Fox was there. Right. And just all these guys, and you kind of got to hang out and play these games together. And I think that, one difference in a way, fame then, before social media, it sort of was kind of a group or a club. And I think a lot of people, had a desire to get into that, and people would welcome you into that group. And it was something that you would earn through hard work. And there wasn't always this individual pursuit of kind of their own identity, their own brand. I think now there's such a pursuit of being famous, which is such a different goal. And then you were trying to get on kind of cool shows and work with interesting people and be able to expand what you were doing, and just wanted to be a part of great experiences. And I think that it's still a better barometer to operate from. Work on your craft, do the things that you love, what you believe in. It's easy to get caught up in trying to chase the brand and the fame, but I don't think people have the enduring careers, or quite frankly, the happiness that they're seeking when they choose that over the other. I think sometimes there can be too much of an emphasis on that, and kind of not on the work or on the process or the choices that you're making.
Right. You're just chasing the biggest thing.
That's right. You're kind of chasing approval or likes, and that's not a great place to work from in life.
Yeah. All right. So Ralphie Parker, when this came up, did this feel like a special role that you were getting? And how old were you when this crossed your path?
I was 12, and I started acting at 2.5. So at this point, I had been in it for a pretty long time, and I had done some movies and TV shows. I think I might have even been on Real People at the time, or just about to start it. So I had some success, and certainly a lot of experience. And at that point, you would do these audition circuits. So I was living in Phoenix, so I would fly into LA for maybe 2 days, and they would consolidate the auditions. You'd have 4 or 5 a day for just a variety of projects. And this was another one that came up. It seemed cool. You get your scene, you prepare. Yeah. I went in. Bob Clark, the director, was there. I read, felt like did okay from what I can remember, and never heard anything. Didn't hear a peep. And 3 months later, got a call if I would go screen test, which is a very crazy process that we can talk about if you want. I later found out that I was the very first person that Bob Clark, the director, had seen. And he said, well, yeah, I loved him, but I'm not going to hire the first kid I see. So I'm going to go on my journey and see. And he later had said that I was always kind of in the back of his mind as the right choice. And then we went up, and these screen tests, you have to prepare all these different roles. So I prepared for Flick, Schwartz, Ralphie, and maybe even Randy, the little brother. And then they do all this mix, and they're like chemistry reads, they call them.
Wow.
And they mix and match everybody. So they're like, all right, Peter, here, you're Ralphie. All right, now go back, you'll be Flick, and he's going to be Ralphie, and you're this. And they do it. And it's so obvious, even though they tell you, oh, you did great, you're doing great. They slowly eliminate people one at a time. So it's like Survivor, you get sent home, right. Even though they're like, oh, we'll let you know. You're like, and the kid's like, yeah, I didn't get it. And then they whittle it down sort of to the core, and then generally tell you. So Bob called me in and said, you've got the part.
Well, it's amazing because now the part is so iconically associated with you that so much work went on. I would assume You come in, you go, oh yeah, that's the kid, done. But there's a
No,
process.
he said he went on a nationwide search, and it was, it's an interesting. Didn't really know specifically at the time, but there's very little dialogue. So much of the performance is in listening,
Right.
because so much of the narration covers a lot of what it is, and it's kind of eccentric. I mean, he's a dreamer, so it's expressive, but he wanted to. It's a very cool tone that they nailed, because it feels real, but it also sort of goes to kind of eccentric places.
And Bob Clark was known before this for Porky's, which was whatever Porky's is now, but for me was formative when I was 12 or whenever I saw it.
Completely.
But were you at all like, oh boy, what kind of ride are we in for going into this movie from the guy who brought you Porky's?
Completely, because the first night I arrived in production, we got there a little early to rehearse, and Bob said, "Oh, I'm screening my new movie. Um, you guys want to come to a screening?" And I was with my mom. We said, "Sure." So I didn't even know what it was, but we went in, and the first scene of the movie is a guy inflating balloons, putting them on his groin, and popping them on people.
Right.
And it was Porky's too. And my mom kind of turned to me like, "Oh my gosh, what have I gotten you into?" But that was the genius of Bob. He also did horror movies. He did hardcore drama. He did tribute with Jackie Benson. He did loose cannons with Gene Hackman, like screwball comedy, and Dan Aykroyd. A lot of filmmakers, and I think Hollywood wants to put you into a category or a box. You're the comedy guy, or you're this guy.
Yeah.
Do yourself a favor and look at his resume. It's wild. He was just a great storyteller, and he traveled in genres and tones like kind of no one I've ever seen, and on a successful level.
Yeah. This felt like, in a weird way, it felt like, oh, Christmas Story is like the sweet makes up for anything that happened in Porky's with
Completely.
The
Yeah. And it took them, I learned, Bob had, so Christmas Story is based on short stories written by Gene Shepard. And Gene Shepard was a big radio personality back in the day, but also wrote a lot of short stories. And so the book that A Christmas Story is based on is just a series of short stories, the gun being one of them. The turkey being one of them, the leg lamp being one of them, tongue on the flagpole. So they weave these together and just had the gun as sort of the A story that kind of kept you what you were tracking as an audience. And then each little tidbit was another short story. And it took them about 12 years to get the movie made. Wow. Nobody wanted to make the movie. They thought it was this sort of bizarre voiceover period. Who wants to watch a kid get a BB gun? It's the 40s. It didn't check any of Hollywood's boxes of sexiness and loudness. And I think Bob had to agree to do some other movie for MGM at the time. And I think even surrender his salary to get the movie made because it was a small budget.
Wow. So it really was a passion project for him.
It was totally a dedication. And I'd been on a lot of movies at that point, just in smaller parts and some leads. I'd never seen anybody more prepared. He had these note cards of every shot. He really had the movie completely in his head. So production was about just capturing what he needed, not sometimes the chaos of let's shoot everything and then we'll figure it out in the edit room.
Right.
There was such a precision to it. And this was also before video tap, where generally the director sits behind a monitor and watches. So the director used to be right up next to the lens, and he read all the narration to me. So I would be sitting there, and whether there's long monologues of narration, I'm just kind of thinking and dreaming, and his face is about this far from mine in a close-up. And he read it at just the pace that he kind of knew it needed to be, because he didn't want to make edits in some of those scenes. So it was a very precise exercise. And for me, it was a lot of work because I think the movie's like 102 minutes or something. I'm in about 100 minutes of it. So there was nothing they could do without me.
Right. It's now 30 plus years, 35 years, 82. I'm forgetting exactly the date.
83 it came out. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any highlights that you remember from the shoot, or lowlights, or just moments from being on set that are like, oh my God, I can't believe still there 35 years later?
One weird sort of aspect to it was in that time, the sort of child labor laws were a little different. So you could work longer hours. And if you were a California resident, those labor laws traveled, but I was an Arizona resident and there was no real labor laws in Arizona. So we kind of worked out this thing where I think legally I was allowed to work a lot. And it was just sort of like, my mom would say, look, if he's tired, we're going to stop. But if he feels okay, we're going to keep on going. And so a lot of, it was kind of a grind, but I loved it. One funny thing is that scene where I'm doing I'm kind of the cowboy and envisioning defending the property with the gun, and they're all huddled under the kitchen table. I'm supposed to have some chewing tobacco in my mouth, and so we're about to shoot, and the prop guy, the prop man generally handles those things for actors, and they come up with some solution, obviously. So he hands me the stuff that I put in and put it in. I said, okay, good, ready to go. Got my wad in there. We're shooting, and a few minutes later, I start to get a little bit dizzy. I start sweating. My stomach starts hurting, and Pop's like, cut, what's wrong? I was like, I don't know, man, I feel terrible. And he goes, what's in your mouth? And the prop guy goes, chewing tobacco. He gave me Red Man longleaf. And Bob's like, what are you doing? He's like, well, the scene called chewing tobacco. He's like, he's 12. So we stopped, and then they mushed up raisins, which they should have done the first time, stuck it in. Then I continued, but I remember I got really dizzy. I had to lay on the couch in the set in the living room for about an hour, calmed down, drank a lot of water, and then went back.
Yeah, they got the 12-year-old pretty buzzed.
They got me totally buzzed. We also had a lot of fun shooting the Santa scene because that sled was real. So when they took a lunch break, none of us ate. We just went down forwards, backwards, on our stomachs, on our backs. We just maximized all that time. And I think Bob was very encouraging of that. He wanted you to feel real and those friendships to feel real.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. I've been on a lot of sets where it's like, get the kids out of here, get the whatever. And it's
or rules, our insurance doesn't do it. It was a different time. It was just let them have fun and let them burn out their energy and, let them just be kids. The end scene when I nearly shot my eye out and fell in the snow. I mean, it was brutally cold, and I was in one layer of pajamas. And so we would shoot as much as we could and then run inside the house to a space heater. They'd throw blankets over me. I'd warm up, and they're like, all right, go. Run back out, shoot a line, and go back in.
I was reading that the snow was, a lot of it was made of soap.
Yeah, exactly right. So that was sort of a lot, they do a lot of digital adding now, right? Which they can do. But back then it was like foam. And I remember there was like this big foam truck that came and they just hosed down all the streets behind. Cause we got a little bit unlucky with it. We shot in Cleveland, most of the exteriors, some in Canada, but most of them did. And Cleveland left the Christmas decorations up. So we shot in January, and right after Christmas, they left them up for that. And, the weather didn't cooperate a ton. Sometimes you get hot days and the snow would melt. So they just bring up the foam truck and blow it. You can kind of see in the feet that we're kind of slushing through suds.
Right.
No, but it looks and feels very real.
Yeah, they're all like beautiful postcards that capture a moment.
Completely.
Yeah,
and that was a genius of sort of how Gene wrote the Midwest and how much he idolized it and, felt about it. And it's this funny juxtaposition of sort of grime and not that far out of the Depression, but a kind of beauty and a humanity within that. And so I think they did a great job from a production design standpoint of capturing that. And people, it doesn't seem, generally, you do a period piece, it feels like, oh, that's a long time ago, but it still feels like our families today.
Right. It's not just one person's nostalgia. It seems like a collective.
Yeah, and that's really the biggest takeaway from fans that I get. They're like, you don't understand, that's my family.
Right.
That is my family too. And they feel a real sense and connection, I think, to that group.
Does any part of it feel like your family now?
Oh yeah, the dynamics, I think the messiness of it, the sort of chaos of it, and it's real. It's like, it's not that kind of Disney family. Right. But it's also not the, the sort of icky drama that explores the dark sides of family. Right. It's sort of reality, but you can tell the dad's got a temper on him. Right. Mom's trying to cover. When Randy hides under the thing and says dad's going to kill Ralphie, it just probably comes from at least some point in the past.
Yeah.
So you get the sense of that, and I think just the pressures of Christmas and wanting it to be great.
You shot in Cleveland, you get the cold of Cleveland, but you have to fake the snow. So you're shooting.
I know.
It could have been Burbank ultimately, but
It probably
there's,
could have.
there's something very authentic about it because I noticed the house is still, people can visit the house in Cleveland, that there's tours.
Somebody turns it into a museum, and people, I guess, can not only go there, but I guess you can stay the night in one of the bedrooms. I've never been, but I've heard that it's quite the place.
Any scenes or moments cut from the movie that you remember shooting and wish were in?
Yeah, well, there was a big one, and unfortunately, it's lost because we don't. Back then, I don't think the preservation is so big now in digital. You just throw it all up in the cloud and it stays there forever. But back then, it was film, it was tangible, so you had to do something. And when stuff was cut out, it got lost. But the one thing Bob told me that they really had to get right, and they did a little bit of audience testing where you put a group together and you get comments, were the fantasy sequences, because you really had to get them right. They were different, and audiences liked them, but they had shot one too many, and the one that they shot that they ultimately cut out was another fantasy of mine. Thinking of how useful this gun would be for the world, and I was on a planet with Flash Gordon, who was pinned down behind space rocks, and Ming the Merciless was about to get him, and Flash was helpless, and I showed up in a silver bikini, like little shorts and shirt and a space hat with my Red Ryder, and
Awesome.
he's like, "Thank God you're here," take him out, and was able to stop Ming, who threw his hands up, and I was able to save the space world and probably planet Earth. But that was the one that they said, "Okay, you crossed the line here." And in thinking about it, you can say it doesn't feel like it fits in the movie.
Right.
But that's part of the process. You create this stuff, and then you kind of find out what works, because there's this as a writer. It's like there's the writing version of it.
Right.
Like, hey, this feels pretty good, and then we go to set and we get all this stuff. You're like, hey, that felt pretty good, and then you put it all together. You're like, whoa, what do we have here?
Yeah.
And then it's the final rewrite, as they call it, in the edit room, where you really polish it and make it into the film.
The other thing I read when I was reading about the soap was that you got to take home the Red Ryder BB gun, the rabbit suit, and the broken glasses. Not that it was just in an article somewhere. I said,
yeah,
you got to take those home. Are any of those artifacts still in your possession, and have any ended up at like the Smithsonian, or what's the weirdest place you've seen them end up?
No, I've lent them to the Academy of Motion Pictures. Did a big Christmas story thing, and we did a big Q&A for the Academy members a couple of years ago. So I brought them out for that. I keep them in sort of a humidity controlled vault, like one of those places that sort of houses stuff, because there was only one bunny suit. I think there were a couple of leg lamps, and I don't know of any other guns either. And I do have the gun. And then also we did a musical based on A Christmas Story. And when that opened on Broadway, the big Macy's window, which has all the Christmas displays, we put the gun and the bunny suit in there, which was cool. And I also have the cowboy suit. So they did a beautiful display of Christmas Story in that window. And
that's great.
That's great. By, and I would see a lot of the people pressed up in the window taking pictures and posing in front of it.
And then when it came out, it wasn't a hit immediately.
No.
How was your reaction? How many years later did you realize, like, oh, this thing is still around and starting to gain steam?
I think it really benefited from the momentum of cable television at the time in 1983, and really still kind of VHS. So before then, it was really just you go to the movies or you have your 13-channel universe, and that was it.
Right.
And so a lot of movies, big hit movies would appear on your TV, but not really after that run. And so the movie came out, did fine. It was no world beater. It did okay. Probably did worse than they had hoped, and you kind of think, all right, well, that's it. And then like year after year, it would start coming, and I would notice it on video, because I would go to the video store a lot as a kid and get videos. And then around Christmas time, I would see like a standee of me in a video store, watch it again this Christmas. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And it was just this seasonal title of that. And maybe there just hadn't been any great Christmas movies in that area. And It's a Wonderful Life was sort of getting, for its generation, and this generation needed one, and it was really then. And then it, you know, it just kind of kept going, and then this marathon that they do on TBS and TNT for 24 straight hours.
So almost everybody watches this once a year. It's like there's nothing
Yeah,
quite
I
like
know.
that. Do you watch it once a year?
It winds on in our house. It feels like an old comfortable shoe, and not because I want to watch myself. It just, the sounds and the feeling of it seem to feel, it just sort of feels like Christmas, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Have you watched it with your, I guess you're older, you said
Yeah, you know, we have, and my daughter sort of looked at TV and said, "Daddy," and she kind of got. I don't think she quite knows yet what the difference between you're here and you're there.
right.
But yeah, it's kind of wild because I've seen it hold the attention of 3-year-olds, even though it's pretty wordy in dialogue. It's not, you know, slipping on banana peels kind of humor, and it obviously holds the attention of adults. So there's just something about the, you know, I think
The
the
calm.
rhythms and the fact that I think kids like watching kids,
Yeah.
you know, and if there's a lot of kids on the screen, for a lot of it, and even if they're not quite getting it, I think it's fun to see people closer to their age.
I worked with Letterman a lot, and we'd go out and shoot stuff on the street. And people would, you know, as soon as they saw Letterman, they took some ownership. Like, I know Letterman, and they just scream at him, "Letterman, how about a top 10?" And sometimes even worse, they'd just be like, "Letterman, top 10," not even asking for one, just
Yeah,
identifying
yeah.
two things. Have you had moments of, I mean, there's so many lines, "You'll shoot your eye out, kid," or whatever, where people, is there a right way to say that when somebody sees you at the mall, or is that always just sort of a nightmare?
Well, definitely it's "You'll shoot your eye out," you know, you get a lot, or "Hey, Ralphie,"
Yeah.
as opposed to, you know, I was thinking there might actually be a real name there.
Right.
Um, I think I have it lucky because most fans are just really excited. But yes, you know, I mean, obviously, no one likes to be bothered when they're eating, or generally when, you know, a question is always better than a statement or a demand, from somebody. I think that's preferential. But I get a lot of just genuine enthusiasm, and it's a very interesting one because you get a lot of gratitude. People will say thank you for that movie, and thanks for giving our family that tradition, and how much they've enjoyed that over the years. So it's an enviable position to be
Yeah.
in that sense, where I really feel a genuine sense of gratitude so much from the fans who just love it. They have a family tradition of watching it together.
Yeah.
They laugh and swap their own stories of how that compares to what they've done, and so there's just a feeling for them that, you know, they're grateful that the movie was made.
So this is brought to us by Musack.org. We provide instruments for kids around the world. We have a segment that Musack does. It's just tips for kids. You can interpret that however you want. It could be a general tip. It could also be a tip for a young actor or producer.
I think it goes back, and it's one of the reasons why I love what you guys are doing, because I think instruments and music and that time with your instrument allows you the time to experiment and to play and to form a relationship with that. And, you know, to me, it kind of goes back to, what we were saying about chasing fame. I think the beauty of music is to find a device to express yourself through, to connect with, and to enjoy. And so much of the time, so much of this is, oh, I got to get great quick, or I got to get famous. Take a breath, embrace what you're doing, and just enjoy it. And I think the people that you admire the most, the fans, the musicians, if you really look at and seek out their biographies and backstories, that was the approach that they took. That was what they did. Tom Morello, who's the guitarist for Rage Against the Machine, has been a friend of ours for a while, and, you know, he just sat in his apartment and he said he would listen to sounds outside. If he heard a weed eater, a car alarm going off, and he would try to mimic those on a guitar, which is not easy to do. And that's why his musical toolkit is now full of these original sounds. And it just came from experiencing, playing, and having fun. And I think sometimes that can get lost in a pursuit to want to get to the destination quickly. And I think that it's also such in a fast and a loud and a noisy world, such a great gift to yourself to just get quiet, close the door, and just play and experiment and do what makes you happy, and don't worry about what others are telling you with it.
A few last questions. What's a perfect Christmas day for you?
I love Christmas. I still love, I get the feeling, I guess, Christmas morning that you sort of had when you were a kid, that it's this kind of amazing day. I mean, now, having kids, it's perfect. Best part of the day is watching their smiles and then light up, when they see the tree, because it reminds me of how I used to feel when we come out of the bedroom and run early in the morning and see the tree. It's sort of a no stress day. It's just a stay in your pajamas kind of, relax. And there's just an easiness and fun about it.
That's the one day where everything does stop. Like, no, there's no other days where
It stops.
stops.
No, and you're not, having to run to the office and check the email or return that call. It stops. And it's so rare to have that feeling.
Yeah.
Sometimes you feel it maybe on a Sunday afternoon for a minute, but I mean, it is just time stops. It's frozen. And I think it's such and I can struggle with this. It's such an easy opportunity just to be present.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, not to have your mind elsewhere.
Yep.
It's just there and you're there. And I think that's a good thing. And it's something that I have to always tell myself, like, stop, be present, just in my daily life, be here, don't be 17 steps ahead or, on to other things.
Yeah, it's almost impossible. I know.
It's totally impossible.
Last thing you wanted for Christmas but didn't get?
When I was a kid, I was convinced I was going to find buried treasure, and I wanted an underwater metal detector so I could apparently go swimming in lagoons in the ocean to find treasure. And that never arrived on the tree.
There's a great story out here. When you leave Nantucket and take the boat out of the harbor and round the it's called Brant Point, but you round Brant Point, you throw a penny overboard. This has been going on for 100 years, so you have good luck to come back to the island. And everybody always imagines that there's a $5 million worth of pennies somewhere under there.
Right, if you could just find it.
If we had that
It's
underwater,
pretty labor intensive. I know, I could have been your savior. Should have swum out there and done it.
Last idea you saw that was turned into a TV show or a movie that you were like, I wish I had done that.
Shark Tank.
Yeah, good one.
That's like, oh man.
Yeah.
How did I not think of that?
Last thing that made you optimistic?
I mean, not to be too corny, but I think especially now, every day, an effort made on my part to remain that way. Meaning, it's easy to get, and not for bad reason. It's very noisy. It's a very challenging time, and so I really try to be grateful, to meditate a little bit every day, and to remain optimistic. It's my nature too. I mean, literally, like, I would have been the guy on the Titanic, like, everything's okay.
Right.
Not in denial, but just always trying to find the silver lining in things and the hope in things. And I have this sort of, for better or worse, that, things are going to work out.
Yeah.
Feeling. And it's been challenged, I'll tell you now, for sure. So, but it's on the daily to-do list.
Peter, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you for sharing stories.
Thanks, Donick. It's been great to be here.
And we wish everybody, I'll give you the last word, actually.
Thank you. We wish everybody health and happiness as we go towards the end of the year, and a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone. And thanks for watching.
Enjoy A Christmas Story, everybody. Thank you.
Enjoy it. Thank you. Thanks, Donick.